Today is the 11th day of Cheshvan, the 12th of November. 11th day of Cheshvan is traditionally the day of passing of Rachel Imenu. And there's a big question about how we know the date, but it's one of the ones that's been more accepted. It usually goes together with knowing where the burial place is. If you don't know where the burial place is, you usually don't know the date. And if you know the burial place, so people want to have a date because they want to know when do I go.
Has anyone said a different date?
Probably over the years there's been other theories. But in any case, her burial place is one of the only ones that we have a very long-standing tradition about. It used to be that it was south of Jerusalem. Now it's inside Jerusalem. Okay, so we are holding by chapter 28, and so we said that even Ak is called Adam de Bria, the man of creation, because he too has a level at which he doesn't see his origin. Okay, V'nei kedei la'avin zeh. So that was the first 8 lines, was presenting this question. We said, even if we didn't read it, we said everything that was in those 8 lines. V'nei kedei la'avin zeh, at the end of line 8, on page 260. יש להקדים ביאור למה שכתוב בליקוטי האמורים חלק א' פרק ב'. So in the second chapter of Tanya, the very first addendum that the Alter Rebbe himself wrote deals with this question of intention by Hashem, and he already goes in the direction that we mentioned yesterday of trying to solve this apparent dispute between philosophy and Kabbalah about whether you can describe Hashem as knowing. What's the problem with that? That it's also one of the reasons why it's not usually mentioned, but one of the reasons why in the Sfirot, Da'at is in a special place is because of this long-standing dispute. It's one of those things that if the Rambam didn't see the writings like the Zohar, then he had such good Ruach HaKodesh, he had such good preemptive thought about what would happen, that he chose the exact wording that in the Zohar fits perfectly, because the Zohar doesn't usually talk about Hashem's knowledge. It doesn't use that word da'at. It has da'at in a lot of places. When it's talking about Hashem, it doesn't usually use that. It uses all the other sfirot. And all the other sfirot we have names for. And then there's this thing called da'at, knowledge, which translates again as knowledge. And again, you can't discount, we already learned it. There's a verse that Chana, Samuel's mother, says, Kel de'ot avaya, that Hashem has da'at. He has knowledge. So you can't discount it. So to say that Hashem is not knowledgeable wouldn't make sense. To say that the Zohar discounts it, also not true, because the Zohar doesn't put it into the Sfirot, usually. And so we get to see, what most people know is that if you count Keter, you don't count down. If you count Da'at, you don't count Keter to get into 10 Sfirot. But there's this whole thing with Da'at, where is Da'at standing? So the way that the Rambam phrased it, again, that he wanted to describe Hashem's highest essence, where he wanted to say there is complete unification. He could have chosen loving kindness. He could have said, he's the one who loves, he is the love, meaning he's the lover, he's the love, and he's the beloved. He could have said that. He didn't say that. He could have said, he is the mighty, he is the might, and he is the one he is attacking. He could have used any of the examples in the world. But the Rambam uses Hua Yodea v'Hua De'a v'Hua Yadua. He is the knower, he's the power of knowing, meaning the knowledge, and he's what he knows. And again, the point here is not so much what he chose. I'm just saying it's amazing that he chose this, because it's the one that fits the best with Kabbalah. and it doesn't present a head-on Kabbalah, because Kabbalah usually doesn't talk about Hashem as dat. Again, because why not? Because when we talk about Hashem as knowing, usually in the Tanakh, in the Bible, we're talking about a lower. Hashem says, "I have erdana ve'erev, erdana ve'eda." I have to come down, vayeda Elokim. I have to come down in order to know. Like knowledge is something lower than Hashem in some sense in the Bible. It's not. Again, it's a very tricky word. This word knowledge. What do you mean? Because again, the modern meaning is much better, which is consciousness. Do you mean that Hashem is conscious? What do you mean he's conscious? How does that even work? Okay, so again, it's like mudut, consciousness. So again, the Rambam, I'm saying this is like some premonition that he had, that he used this word, yodea. He could have chosen any of the other adjectives in the world, but he chose this one. And ostensibly the reason is because that's what they used in scholasticism. But I don't think the Rambam was too sophisticated for that. But it could be.
When you see it in Mitzrayim, that's why it's called
V'da Elokim.
That's not, that's already a deeper.
It's only after he comes down that he knows. It's like it's not up there somehow. In any case, so this was a collision, and we'll see this more in the next chapter. But it's setting us up for a collision. And therefore, because what's the problem? How can you call Hashem anything? Why would you say Hashem is any kind of intellectual power? Consciousness in the end is something in the mind. Even if you say consciousness, all the more so if you just say knowledge. So why would you describe Hashem as something intellectual? God's not something intellectual. But that's what the Rambam says. Again, the Rambam's point was complete unity. That in God you can't separate these three aspects. Today it's very easy to understand what this is. Like in a computer you have the CPU.
What do you mean the three aspects?
So in a computer you have the CPU that's doing the thinking.
Oh, you mean the three, okay.
You have the what it's thinking about, which is in its memory.
Right.
And then you also have the computer itself, physically the thing itself. So these three things are separate. You can take the memory out. We have memory sticks. It's not a problem. You can put a better CPU in.
Unified with him.
But in Hashem, these are one thing entirely. You can't separate them at all. So really what the Rambam wants to say is that when we talk about Hashem's unity, if I apply this to knowledge, this is what it looks like. He's not trying to say there's three things and they're unified. That's not at all what he's saying. People mistake this for what he means. He means to say Hashem is completely unified. Any example of any adjective that you take, you can divide it into po'el, pula, nif'al is how the Rogatchover says it. There's many ways to say it. The noun, the verb, and the musa. How do you say the musa in English?
Subject.
The subject, I guess, that you're acting on. And in Hashem, these three things are always the same, one thing. It doesn't matter which ones you choose, but he chooses knowledge. And that was the part that the Kabbalists got angry at. If you would have said, he's just one, and for example, but that's not what the Rambam says. The Rambam makes it sound like this is what God is. The simple way to answer is like what I just said. It's an example. It's not. He didn't mean it in any particular way. But it's not so simple by the Rambam, because the Rambam in the end, in many places, places da'at above everything else. And so, for instance, he says that when a person passes away, what's left? He says the only thing that's left is his da'at Torah. Only thing that's left after a person passes away, meaning the soul, is his awareness, consciousness of Torah. Whatever he collected during his life. That's what he has. So by the Rambam, dat is a big deal. So you can't just discount it and say, okay, it's just an example. He doesn't bring it as an example. It seems to be that he's saying Hashem is more dat than he is anything else. And that's why he chose this example. In any case, this put him at odds with the Kabbalists. Because the Kabbalists say, by us, again, dat is tricky. I'm saying he hit on something here. Because the Kabbalists don't like to say dat is a sfirah. They have a problem with it. It's only much, much later that this was figured out, like how to deal with it. I don't know what the original reason why dat wasn't included is. Again, because we have a pasuk, we have many pasukim that say Hashem has dat. In any case,
it's multi-layered. I mean, it's many levels. There are many levels of that.
Also, but and that becomes like it just shows you there's an issue here. There's some kind of issue here. In any case, Vodulo, and the Alter Rebbe writes in this addendum, he writes, וכתב על זה וזה לשונו, והודו לו חכמי הקבלה גם כן בזה. כמו שכתוב בפרדס מהרמק, וגם לפי קבלת האריזה על יציב המילתא, בסוד התלבשות אור אינסוף ברוך הוא, על ידי צמצומים רבים, בכלים דחב"ד דאצילות, אך לא למעלה מהאצילות. So he says there that the Kabbalists in the end agreed. Where did they agree? So he says in the Ramak, he says in Moses Cordovero, he says that he quotes the Rambam. He does. He quotes the Rambam with this, and he doesn't seem to have a big problem with it. And then by the Arizal, where that does become a Sfirah, and it's very clear, by the Ramak, that is not exactly a Sfirah yet. So maybe that's why, again, that solution. But by the Arizal, it's a huge problem, because that is definitely a Sfirah. He says even there, he agrees also. How do we explain it according to the Arizal? That there's an enclosement of the infinite revelation of Hashem through many, many, many contractions. And this is a big chiddush to many people. But we said it last time, that there's many contractions, not just one. And every time there's a contraction, it means that whatever is below the contraction doesn't recognize what's above, at least to a certain degree. And so even when you're talking about Chabad of Atzilut, they too have some kind of contraction above them. Even Chabad of Atzilut, or the more so Dat of Atzilut. So if you say that you want to be talking about the world of Atzilus, you, the Rambam, are right. In the world of Atzilus, we can say that Hashem reveals Himself, His infinite revelation is now enclosed in the mind, in the intellect. So two things that the Alter Rebbe is saying. One, don't hold the Rambam to dat. He's talking about the intellect in general. He's saying Hashem is intellectual in general. The second thing is, he's right, because in the world of emanation, the world of Atzilus, the infinite revelation of Hashem comes down through the intellect. So he's right. And so there you have to say, and then why does he say Chabad Atzilut? Because he wants to say that Chabad, Chochma, Bina, and Das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, they correspond to what the Rambam called Yodea, Yadua, and he wants to say that's those three things. Okay, so that, why do we care? Because for us, again, this is good, because now it says that Ak also can be in a state where there's a tzimtzum before him, and he doesn't know his origin. Even Ak doesn't know 100%. Even primordial man doesn't know. So everything has this state of having a disconnect from its origin, to some level. So, and again, we said this is the relativism of Kabbalah, that every level you go, you'll find this disconnect, this curtain, this parasa in the middle. Right, so that we'll get into in chapter 29. Okay. What does this mean? Just what does this mean then? According to the Alter Rebbe, God is the world of emanation. This is the translation into Hasidic language. Yeah?
Again,
I'll say it again. The way the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad, sees the Rambam is that when the Rambam talks about God, he's talking about the world of emanation.
Wait, about
G-O-D.
Okay, that's right.
God.
Sorry, it's my word. Yeah. Okay, so when
God is the world of emanation for him, because that's how he defines it. Hua yodea, hua madav, hua yadu. So it's a very interesting thing. What does this mean? It means that by the Rambam, there's no yet, call it a recognition that there's anything above emanation. He doesn't have anything above emanation. Meaning he doesn't need the first contraction, he doesn't need primordial man, he doesn't need all these things. Most people read Kabbalah, they think it's some kind of mystical text. Kabbalah came to solve a problem in thought. These people were great thinkers. There's different ways to solve problems in thought. You can go the logical way, you can go the mathematical way, you can go the philosophical way, you can go all kinds of ways. You can go the poetic way. There's all different ways to solve questions in your mind. Kabbalah wants to solve questions, problems. So by the Rambam, there was no problem with leaving God as being the level that's called emanation. That was for him enough. Meaning, if I had to say it like in Greek terms, how did the Rambam see it? Aristotle was the three lower worlds, and Plato is the fourth world, emanation, because that's what Plato talks about. How much did the Rambam know Plato? We don't know. You probably didn't know him so well, but they must have known something about it. To say that they knew it well, they didn't know it well, and because of that, there's a whole dispute between the Rambam and later Reb Chasdai Kreskas, who becomes a Neoplatonist, because he did read Plato. Plato became available in Europe in the 13th century, after the Rambam passed away. But they heard glimpses of it, even though it all came from it was all preserved in not orally for sure people knew, but it was all preserved in Arabic until they found the Latin equivalents, and then finally
we had the Arabic.
There was some of the Arabic.
Some of the Arabic. Okay.
It wasn't very common for someone who wasn't living in Spain to be able to speak Arabic, so they didn't know about it so much. The Rambam probably did know about it. So that was probably his worldview. That was enough for them. Why did Kabbalah suddenly go higher and higher and higher? And for the same reason we go higher and higher. In Chassidus we push the envelope further and further and further away. Because Hashem has to be greater than, because what's happened, we've conquered, our thought has conquered a lot of the things that seemed to be unconquerable before. Before it was like a mystery. Before it's not a mystery anymore because we're dealing with it. The most important thing we're going to see in this chapter is the aspect of paradox that the Baal Shem Tov conquers. The moment you conquer paradox, you have to push Hashem much, much higher. Where there are no paradoxes. But that's not for the Rambam. The Rambam couldn't stand paradox. He said about Hashem cannot contain any paradoxes. Impossible. What you call a paradox is not a paradox. There's no such thing. Not that he contains paradoxes and he's not troubled by them. He says, no, if it's a... Again, if his conception of God is that he's logical, he's wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, you can't handle paradoxes in your intellect. But we've conquered paradoxes a long time ago. We conquered them 120 years ago already. If we follow the Baal Shem Tov, we conquered them 300 years ago. So you have to keep pushing Hashem higher and higher and higher. So where is Hashem? He keeps going higher. What do we mean? We mean the transcendent aspect of Hashem. The immanent aspect of Hashem just becomes bigger and bigger because he's everything that's under the transcendent aspect. So Hashem in a certain sense gets bigger, in a certain sense he gets further away. There is more that's immanent because the mind understands more, and there's a further away transcendence because we have to push Hashem further away when we talk about what's beyond our mind, because our mind understands more today. It's very important to know this, that though we don't think as deeply, we know a lot more. We're not as deep as the first thinkers, but we've conquered a lot more territory when it comes to thought. Okay.